As promised, a very special and groundbreaking guest, Madison Cawthorn, the youngest member of Congress. He'll be sworn in January 3rd at the age of 25, a remarkable election he ran. And now he'll be representing the 11th District of North Carolina. Madison, welcome to the show.
John, thanks for having me on. It's an honor.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you, and I have to call you Congressman-elect now. That's a pretty darn cool title. I like that.
Well, thank you. I'll say it's a whole lot better than candidate. So I'm
For sure.
looking forward to being able to get to work for my people come January 3rd.
Yeah, it's very important, representing those constituents. So a lot of our folks have heard the story of how you got elected, but what is when you look back at your extraordinary rise, winning the primary against a candidate that had been endorsed by a lot of the other power brokers in the Republican Party, and then coming through, beating the Democrat, taking all sorts of attacks against you from left, right, all across. What are some of your biggest takeaways from the election, running for your first office, scoring Congress? What did you take away from this?
I think it all comes down to intentionality. I think that elections are simple to win if you have a good message, you can deliver that message, but also you know where you need to deliver it. My best friend and he's 22 years old. He happened to be my campaign manager.
Wow.
So I was 24 at the time, was not even constitutionally eligible to be a congressman during the primary,
right.
Running against a Donald Trump endorsed candidate, although we are huge for President Trump. We're running against a Donald Trump endorsed candidate, running up against, basically every power broker in Washington was backing this other candidate, including the outgoing congressman. And so we had to sit down and come up with an unorthodox way to be able to beat this traditional campaign we were running against. And so we played it. I don't know if you've ever seen Moneyball, but it's significantly similar to how they did that
How about that
program. Indeed. So we broke down what our number one vote goal was for the entire district. Then we broke that down to each county. Then we broke that all the way down to each precinct. So it was easy to gain volunteers because I said, hey, I need to get 16 votes out of your neighborhood. Can you do that? And almost everyone said, yeah, we can deliver 16 votes for you. And then that ended us up having probably one of the most effective and robust ground games probably in the country throughout this election.
Amazing.
And because of that, we were able to pull off a victory.
So how does someone at the age of 25 with a campaign manager at the age of 22, if I add your two ages together, you're still not as old as I am. How did you learn all of those skills so quickly? Because you're right. Everybody thinks politics about the ads and the message. The message is important, but ground game and precinct and head counts and vote counts are really what wins election. How did you get trained so quickly? What got you so deeply ingrained in the ground game of politics?
Incredible mentorship. We definitely sought out a lot of wise counsel from people who ran campaigns before. Then we got that. And so we kind of had the background knowledge of that, but also due to, being raised in Generation Z, social media is really just second nature to me.
Yeah.
And so our entire campaign, it was very integrated within our campaign to have a strong social media presence. We knew if you could grab these big conservative ideas and put them into a small, well-wrapped package, it was easy to deliver to people. And people enjoy being able to be talked to in a way they can understand, not someone who's using Washington speak. So, we just came to people as real Americans. And I'll tell you, I just spent the last 10 days up in Washington, D.C., and it has become abundantly apparent to me that the people in Washington are not like normal Americans. They are political animals who will do anything for the lust for power.
Yeah, guilty, no doubt about it. I've experienced that in 30 years here, and you're absolutely right about it. So how was those 10 days? I mean, you go to orientation, you're meeting with members of Congress, you're probably passing by AOC in the halls. What was that 10 days in Washington like?
It was incredible. I definitely thought that it was amazing that there's really no playbook to how you can be a congressman. Now, if you want to just be, just another rank and file member in the establishment, then there's definitely a playbook. You just do what leadership says, and everything will fall into line. But if you're trying to really go out and branch out on your own, I kind of liken it to, almost. You think of a Harry Potter or a Gandalf in one of these great works of fiction. They're handed a wand, and you as the viewer, you don't exactly know what they can do with that wand, but it holds incredible power. That's a lot what it's like coming into Congress, because there's really no limitations onto what you can and cannot do in Congress, aside from what the Supreme Court will allow you to do. And so aside from that, if you want to shape a new path and chart a new path for your party, for your country, you're able to help really affect that change. And it was striking to me that, you're looking around, I'm seeing all these people, and the weight of responsibility really became very real to me when I realized, wow, I represent 700,000 people in Washington, D.C., and I'm their only voice. And so it means it's time to really step up and get to work.
Yeah, no, it is. And you're going to be judged now, not on how you ran your campaign, but how you conducted yourself in getting policy done and getting the constituent services done. It's a big task. You tweeted something recently that has really captured my attention, because I've been preaching this for quite some time, and when I give speeches or talk to people, the back end of the millennial generation and the Gen Z generation, they get pasted as liberal socialists, but in fact, if you look at the younger side of the millennials and almost the entire Gen Z, it looks like they're really freedom lovers. They're more like the founding fathers than any generation in America in quite some time. Do you think we old folks here in Washington and in the political establishment, do we have that generation wrong? Are they really freedom lovers and about to become libertarian conservatives?
No, you actually have that pegged exactly right. It's definitely, I would say, a libertarian conservative is probably the best way to describe my generation, because, we have very conservative politics. A lot of people in my generation were alive to see what happened in 2008 when, we saw what poor financial decisions can do to a household and can do to an entire country. And so we know that we want to have conservative politics to where we are wise and fiscally responsible. We also have seen, I was alive to see our Twin Towers fall. I remember it vividly. And so I know that I want to have a very secure country. I want to know that I'm safe. That there are brave men and women who will put on a uniform and go fight and die to keep us free and safe. And so because of that, I think that gives us that lends itself to leaning towards the conservative spectrum of politics. But also in the generation that we've been raised in, we also realize that, Republicans choosing to die on a lot of social hills has made us less effective in the minds of most millennials. And I think that's what's really pushed them over to the far left. And so because of that, I think we should push almost every social decision back down to the state.
Make it a states' rights issue, right?
Exactly, and just as the founding fathers intended, and I think that's why you're probably making that comparison to where we are very similar to the founding fathers. At the end of the day, as long as it doesn't break, your certain inalienable rights, and also doesn't break, what your decisions don't harm another person, then aside from that, it should be pushed down to the states. And because of that, I think it appeals to a very wide range of people, and it turns us into the big tent party.
Now, you being a very strong libertarian and having those freedom instincts, what have you made of the last year with COVID-19 and the different ways that, how a California versus a North Dakota versus a Virginia and a Florida have handled it? What takeaways do you have in the way the local and the federal government have played the COVID-19 crisis? Because obviously it is a crisis, but are you satisfied we have the right remedies?
No, I'm not. It does not seem to me that lockdowns work. And now, in the very beginning, I completely understand having logistical issues. That's a very understandable problem that a hospital can have. They have a budget. They're trying to stick to that budget, and they don't want to buy more paper cost goods than what they think they're going to need.
Right.
And so, when they said that we need, 14 days to flatten the curve or to help, to me, it wasn't necessarily about flattening the curve, but really it was about making sure that they had the appropriate amount of PPE equipment, that they had the right amount of ventilators, we had enough ICU beds. And I'm very happy to say that because we took those 14 days, and I think everyone in America took it seriously,
right.
Not a single person in our country that needed a ventilator went without a ventilator. And I think that's a testament to the current administration. It's a testament to really American ingenuity. You look at Elon Musk, who's able to provide so many. It's really quite incredible.
Yeah.
But post that, I do not believe that the lockdowns have been effective as a real means to keep people safe. Now, if you're afraid of COVID and you want to stay inside, that's completely understandable. Now, if you have pre-existing conditions, you have a heart condition, you have lung conditions, you have diabetes, you're over the age of 65, then of course take the appropriate precaution that you need to do. But if you are somebody who has, statistically a 99.9% survival rate with COVID-19, then I think you should be allowed to stay out inside of the workplace and stay out inside of the country so we can keep our economy going, keep our society moving forward. And so I think that just trying to solve these problems with perpetual lockdowns, one, it will destroy our economy. And because of financial problems, that's going to lead to more single parent households because, we all know that financial issues are the number one cause of divorces in the country. We also know that, what is taught in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, is that, if you're having a really intense urge to have a drink, then go somewhere that's public and sociable. It's not in a drinking setting. And so you can get away from that. So I think we've seen a significant increase to suicides due to alcoholism. And I think we've also seen a significant increase in the amount of child abuse and just abuse that happens, domestic abuse that happens in the homes. And so when they say that these lockdowns might help, sure, they might help the number of COVID-19 related problems, but they create a whole litany of other problems. And I think it makes the cure worse than the actual disease.
Yeah, so it's a point that I think we're going to have a lot of takeaways when we go back and armchair quarterback the last year. Moving on to another issue that I know is really important to you and I think could be a real opportunity in the next Congress. Obviously, you're going into a House where the Speaker is going to be Nancy Pelosi, but you've talked a lot about the big tech companies and the need to rein them in and to end the sort of suppression of free speech that we've seen. And I know that's going to be a very important part of your agenda as you go in. What have you seen and learned? And do you think there's a bipartisan deal to be had to break up the big tech oligopolies and other, or take other action that will open up free speech in America again?
Yes, I do believe there's probably a way we can move forward. But it being bipartisan, it depends what part of the Democratic Party you're working with. I do sincerely believe that the Democratic Party has been hijacked by the far left. And in my opinion, I don't think that their number one priority is, climate change. I don't think their number one priority is healthcare. I believe that the number one policy priority of the far left radical Democrats is elections. They want to be able to control what is said and what you can and cannot do and how you can vote so that they can gain power and keep it forever. And so I believe that it is incumbent upon us in America to fight back against that. And a way we can do that is by continuing to protect our rights to free speech. I have a video series when I normally post them on Facebook and Instagram that I call Newtown Square. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to really ingrain in people's minds that these Newtown Squares that we have, that although they are private companies, these social media companies are acting as a platform. That means that it's within the town square. And if you can't go into the town square and freely and openly debate ideas that might hurt somebody's feelings, then that means that we're going to be able to just go like sheep to the slaughter. And we won't be able to actually fight back against what's going to come from the radical Democrats. Because in my mind, all they want is power. And I pray to God that they never get it. But I'll tell you, I do believe that there might be a way to get bipartisanship inside of these big tech companies to where we can actually work forward with some of the Democrats to be able to try and pass, sensible legislation that treats these companies more like a utility rather than a private company. The day that big government starts telling private companies what they can do, that's one major step back towards communism. And so we can't allow that to happen. But we do understand that because of basic necessities of life, things like water and electricity, they have to be treated differently than, say, a pizza company down the road.
So the argument would be that because Facebook and Twitter thrive on internet communication lines that cross state lines or across the public utility use right-of-ways, that there may be some exercise of government power to make sure that they allow those to be used freely. Is that sort of the thinking you have on big tech?
You're exactly right, John. That's exactly where my mind's going.
Wow, interesting. That's going to be a fun argument to watch. And there's an interesting dynamic because Democrats just think they're too big and they want to break them up like they broke up Ma Bell and AT&T 20, 30 years ago. So there's this interesting dynamic where the free speech interests of the libertarians and the conservatives could align with certain Democrats to get some things going. When you look at the emerging platforms, the Rumbles and the Parlors of the world, the Clout Hubs, are you feeling more confident that competition can also solve this problem? If you get thrown off one platform, another one invites you on, the competition of ideas may exist. Are you heartened to see new platforms coming up?
I am hard to see that. I really think, specifically, I believe Parler has been doing an incredible job of marketing himself as the free speech destination.
Yeah.
And so, I think that I am confident. I believe that competition solves almost every single problem we face in America, including healthcare.
Right.
I believe that when you let the free market reign, it works very well. But, it's hard to have a free market system when you have these giant monopolies like we have with Facebook and Google. And so I'm looking forward to these, specifically Parler and a lot of these other platforms that you mentioned coming up to create the competition we need.
Yeah, that's, I think, going to be one of the really fun dynamics to watch in 2021, because these platforms are just getting to critical mass now where they're able to compete in that space. And I think that'll be one of the big things we'll be watching. As you look ahead to next year, what are some of your other policy priorities, other things you want to accomplish in your first year in Washington as a congressman?
Well, no. Well, I definitely wanted to assess the battlefield that I was going into, and so, a big thing that I want to do is really be the face of healthcare reform for the American people within the Republican Party.
Wow.
Simply because I represent the consumer end of a normal healthcare consumer, and I think I can bring a unique perspective because of that. But unfortunately, I don't believe that there's going to be any bipartisanship with the Democrats with my ideas, because where they want socialized medicine, I just basically want to take us back to the Wild West. Let's have free market capitalism reign within the healthcare systems, because really we've never had the free market touch healthcare. Really, the laws were written in 1942. They're antiquated and they're outdated. But the Democrats and the Republicans and myself, we have some vastly different ideas of how we can get that solved. So assessing my battlefield, knowing that's a battle we won't be able to win, one that I do think we'll be able to get past is definitely something that's going to go along the lines of infrastructure reform. I'm sure it's no secret to you, John, but in a lot of places in rural America, like
It's
some of the
amazing
West.
what's happening.
Indeed. And so, and in some of the rural counties in America, it's very difficult for them to get broadband connection.
Yep.
And when you have these areas that have a willing and able and ready workforce, but you don't have the actual infrastructure needed for manufacturing jobs or for textile mills, that's going to make it more difficult upon us to be able to get jobs back from China. And so I definitely want to fix those infrastructure problems so that we can have a stronger economy. But I just want to use this one point as a segue to one of my most important things, and I think it will be the battle of my age against a foreign power. I really want to get upon the Foreign Affairs Committee so that we can really take on China head on. I think that the way that you can tell they're playing a very long-term game.
They are.
Yeah, and so, but it's time for us to start fighting back boldly. Donald Trump is the first president I know of, in the last 30 years who's really openly stood up to China. And I'm telling you, it's time to get tough on China.
Yeah, and there's no doubt. And you can see the gains they're making, particularly not beyond the Asia-Pacific Rim now, but in the Asia-Pacific Rim, particularly what's happened in Hong Kong, what they're threatening to do with Taiwan. It is the #1 foreign policy challenge of the future, and it's great to hear a young person like you, really focused on that and zeroing in, because it's going to be an important discussion. And many here in Washington are favorable to China because they have financial or other entanglements, and so it'll be an interesting opportunity for you to sound the alarm. Going back to healthcare, because I think it is one of those missed opportunities that Republicans have not been able to deliver an alternative that's resonated. Do you have a couple ideas that you could throw out there that would show a different approach to healthcare? Because I do think that that's an issue when people are faced with socialized medicine or single payer medicine versus a market alternative. They always want the market alternative. What do you see as some good ideas that could resonate and gain traction across the country?
I think simplifying the arguments. As we saw when we had the majority in 2016 to 18, what we really saw happen was that, all we said is we want to repeal and replace Obamacare. But John, you're a very shrewd political commentator, so you might know this. But I don't think that the majority of Americans actually knew what Republicans wanted to replace it with.
Right.
And so because of that, it was hard to rally the people behind us. And because we live in a democratic republic, you have to have that public support. So I think that we need to simplify our message and make it very clear. And, in my opinion, I think that we need to take this back to, where I live right now. I'm in Western North Carolina. And from where I'm sitting, I can pick up a phone and there are 4 pizza companies that will deliver to my house right now. And so I think that it could be simplified to the fact that saying, hey, those four companies know they are competing for my dollars and for my business. And so because of that, they are going to try and get me the best tasting pizza, meaning the highest quality, at the fastest possible way they can get it here for the least amount of money. And if they can promise me those three things, then they're for sure going to get my money. But because of that, that's going to create a market-based system amongst those four companies to where they are going to start really striving to give the best service they possibly can. And I think that if we implemented that into our healthcare systems, where we remove a lot of this regulation that exists around a lot of the insurance companies, where you have to get a certificate of need to operate inside of a state, I think that would increase the amount of competition, and it would help hold these insurance companies and healthcare providers accountable. Because right now, in North Carolina, where I live, Blue Cross Blue Shield ultimately has basically a virtual monopoly across this entire state. And so I think that we need to introduce some more legislation to reduce the regulations around healthcare. I think that would cheapen it and make it more affordable, more accessible for people.
This telemedicine, which we kind of all converted to quickly with COVID-19. If you had a sore throat, you didn't go to the doctor's office, you called them on your phone and you did that. Does that give some unique opportunities, not only to create competition, but to extend access without the normal expense of a doctor's visit and a lab visit, all those things? As someone who has strongly urged the use of technology to move this country forward, do you see that as one of the new emerging areas for cheap, effective healthcare for people who don't have it today?
Absolutely. And the example for that is I just want to say, look at the market share that Amazon has right now.
Yeah.
When you move away from this brick and mortar mentality, it creates significantly less cost overhead, and you can service more customers because of that. And so I think that's a great avenue for us to choose.
It's going to be an interesting time. So you'll get to Washington, you'll get sworn in on the 3rd. What does your first month look like? Do you have a 30-day agenda of what you want to try to accomplish in that first month?
Well, I know a lot of people are trying to position for spots on leadership in the future, or they're trying to get their footholds to go to the next rung of political power. But I'll tell you, I think that that's the problem with Washington, D.C. We don't have enough representatives. And so my first 30 days are completely district focused. I want to have the most robust, most efficient, and easiest and most accessible constituent services that out of any congressman across this country. And so, I'm really going to be focused here at home in the district. I specifically want to make sure that my main place of residence, where my family is, where I live, is still here in Western North Carolina, so that I look these people in the eyes every single day, and I know that I'm not going to betray them. I know what their needs are. I think we have far too many people who live inside of a bubble of Washington, D.C., and so because of that, they're unable to really effectively know what the people in their constituency want. And so my first 30 days is going to be all about the district.
Wow, that's an important message to send. How about that? One last question, because it's one that I know when I talk to the young people here in the office and around the country, the crushing deficit, the debt, the excessive spending, the explosion of the size of government. We have government agencies upon government agencies that supervise government agencies. It's crazy. Do you have any ambitions to start efforts to shrink the size of bureaucracy in government, try to get it back down to a manageable cost, and also a manageable bureaucracy that actually is responsive to the American people?
I absolutely do. This is something I campaign pretty heavily on.
Yeah.
And John, I'll tell you, if you ever have to prove this to somebody, just tell them that to say that our government has grown too large, just say, hey, pick any 3 letters within our alphabet, put them together, and the odds really are in your favor that you will that you'll have the acronym for some major government agency or division that is designed to tell us what we can and cannot do. I really think these 3-letter agencies, as I like to call them, have become the 4th branch of government. But unfortunately, we don't have there's no real checks and balances like there are on the other 3 branches of the government. And so I want to introduce some legislation where we can have direct oversight of these particular agencies inside of our country, and to give us a line item veto of budget, so we can go through and say, why are we giving the ATF, however many billions of dollars we give them every single year? Let's limit that so that we can rein them in and protect the American people. I think that's one of the number one policy positions the Republicans should have, because again, if you want to win my generation, just promise us more freedom, and we'll come along.
Such an important point. Well, Congressman-elect, we're excited for your adventure that is about to start on January 3rd. We're going to be following you here closely at justthenews.com. Our congressional correspondent, Nick Ballasy, I'm sure will be in touch. But we wish you luck, and we look forward to having you back on the show after the new year.
Great, John. Well, I looked forward to shaking up our country, so hopefully it'll be pretty newsworthy. I can't wait to come back on.
Sounds like a good plan.